impossible problem to tackle, getting the entire world to stop using the widely available chemicals that cause the damage. And yet, the international community did exactly that with the Montreal Protocol, an agreement championed by conservative heroes Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, who called it a, quote, monumental achievement. Today, it is widely viewed as a model of global cooperation. Right now, as time is winding down for climate negotiators in Paris faced with a similarly difficult task, bringing the world together to reduce carbon emissions that are warming the planet, we know that that difficult task is possible because we do have some precedent in the Montreal Protocol. And joining me now, Bob Inglis, former Republican congressman, executive director of Republican.org. And Bob, it seems to me that the argument about futility is the most dangerous one about climate right now. And the Montreal Protocol, championed by Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, is as good a model as any.
Yeah, I think that's right, Chris. It shows the importance of American leadership. It also shows that really you can solve problems, scientific questions that actually have solutions.
Yeah, and I think it also, I mean, it's interesting to go back. I was going back to the archives of the coverage of that, right? I mean, Thatcher and Reagan didn't view cooperation on this as selling out, you know, as being suckered or selling out some conservative principles. They, in fact, viewed it the other way. They viewed it as essentially part of their role in global leadership. Well,
and you would think that conserving might have something to do with being a conservative, and so perhaps that's what Ronald Reagan saw. And of course, Secretary of State George Shultz says that Ronald Reagan bought an insurance policy. That's the way he viewed action on this.
That's interesting because you've used that same metaphor with me before.
Yeah, it's basically that Reagan was acquainted with the science. He knew there was, he counted on the scientists to give him good advice. And then he took steps to ensure the future. And that's, of course, what we need to be doing on climate change. We need American leadership here. The will, which is what we hope comes out of Paris, needs to be matched with a way. And, of course, that's what's up to us in America, I think, to figure out as the indispensable nation how to solve the problem. That
point about American leadership, it's always so odd to me that when we're talking about something like ISIS, right, you know, politicians, particularly conservative Republican politicians, say, we need to lead. We can't just let other people do this. When you talk about climate, they say, well, the Chinese, the Indian, I mean, everybody, you know, what are we really going to do? All of a sudden, the role for American leadership seems to do a 180.
Yeah, and, of course, in this case, I think what it might be is that the solution so far has seemed anathema. It seemed a bigger government solution maybe with cap and trade or a clean power plan. There are alternatives that you and I have talked about before, like a revenue-neutral, border-adjustable carbon tax. A way of getting conservatives to see that there's a solution here that involves actually a smaller government,
right,
not a bigger government.
All right, Bob Inglis, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me.